everybody can use your phones and devices, we will get started. All right. Welcome everybody to the January 18th meeting of the Long Range Planning Committee. My name is James Schroll. I'm a member of the Planning Commission, and I'm chairing this special bluff study meeting. Before we get started here, I'll go over a few ground rules and a few pieces of information for those of us who are here in person and those who are joining online. So we are holding this hybrid public meeting, which enables remote electronic participation as legally authorized by the Code of Virginia, for the Planning Commission's electronic meeting policy adopted on July 7th, 2022. Folks are participating here, as I said, in the room, and also people are participating remotely. We do have a quorum here in the room, which I should acknowledge based on the roster that was adopted at the recent Planning Commission meeting. I'd like to orient everybody to our hybrid environment and cover a few specifics about how tonight's meeting will run. Members of the public may attend the meeting personally or electronically by using the Microsoft Teams link, which was provided on the LRPC webpage, counties, events, calendar, and the email notification sent to LRPC email subscribers. Additionally, there is a dial-in phone option for anybody who wishes to use it. And if you lose internet connectivity during tonight's meeting, we encourage you to join us by phone. Please keep your phones, devices muted until you're called upon to speak. I'll cover when to turn it on here in a moment. For our virtual attendees, please turn off your video feeds. I will address when to turn it on here in a moment. The meeting chat is active for two purposes: for participants who have technical difficulties, and for those who want to pose brief clarifying questions to the larger audience. Well, this may be monitored by staff. It may not be formally acknowledged. Anybody who's wishing to make public comment needs to do so verbally at the end of the meeting. The chat should not be used for any discussion or any inappropriate statements. For the LRPC members, a few reminders for you. The members of the LRPC are Planning Commission members. There's also members of other county appointed commissions and the nearby neighbors, our civic associations. Rosters of LRPC subgroups are adopted by the Planning Commission at its monthly meetings. Subgroup membership may not change during the course of a project unless adopted, unless a new roster is adopted at a subsequent Planning Commission meeting. At least one alternate member is included, but the chair, myself, needs to be notified if an alternate was. In addition, the names and email addresses of subgroup members are posted on the county website, and we've already acknowledged this. You have a forum, which is allowing for virtual participation. So for members of the LRPC that wish to participate, please, if you'd like to do so, please raise your virtual hand. That indicator, Ms. Chowdhury is monitoring that as well and can help me identify that you wish to speak. I'll recognize those members. I see them. Please turn on your camera and unmute yourself, speaking as an LRPC member, and then once you've concluded your remarks, please turn up your video feed and mute yourself again. For members of the public who are joining us who are not representing an organization at the LRPC table, they do intend to have public comment at the conclusion of the meeting. There is a sign-in sheet here for the people in the room. If you'd like to make a comment, there's a place to do that. Folks who are joining us virtually, who want to give public comment, please indicate that in the chat function. Again, if you'd like to make a public comment, please type that desire into the chat function. The Chowdhury is going to be gathering that. We'll have public comment at the end of the meeting. I'm giving folks 2 minutes at the end of the meeting to make public comment. We will have Lastly, this meeting is being recorded. Anything that's said or captured online is subject to Virginia Freedom of Information Act requirements as well. So that long prelude out of the way. Sorry for all that. Let us go around the table here for our LRPC members, and then we'll do the introductions online. And then we will jump into tonight's. Again, James Schroll, Planning Commission.
Also raised, I'm a resident of Lakeland.
Okay, so you're just a resident, you're not an LRPC member. Ask you. Yes, please. If you're ever there. Yeah.
Jim Lancelli, Planning Commission.
Leo Sarley, also Planning Commission.
Clyde McGraw, Sunrise Senior Living.
Patrick Whitmore with Venable, represent the applicant.
So Mike Powers, just a resident.
Please.
On Sauter, representing that.
Margaret Rose, planning. Nika Chagri, planning.
All right, let's just go around the outside here. You want to introduce yourself? Yes, sir.
Yes, Cecilia Lopez.
You.
Lindsay Stuckey, resident.
Ben Simons, Sunrise.
Thank you.
Joanne McKee, resident.
William McKee, resident.
Bill Goodrich.
Maria Manberg, resident.
I think Mike Powers,
Yeah,
resident.
great.
Holly Shockey, resident.
Chuck Mitchell, resident.
Carl Settlemeyer, resident.
Thank you.
Chris Zebar, resident.
Seaworth, resident.
Thank you. All right, members of the LRPC who are joining us virtually, if you could raise your virtual hand, please. Commissioner Haynes.
Carolyn Haynes with the Forestry and Natural Resource Commission.
Sure,
Did you
Slack.
call me? Hello?
I will come to you in a minute, Ms. Ray. Commissioner Slack.
Chris Slatt with the Transportation Commission. And if everybody in the room could speak up nice and loud when they speak, that would be of great benefit to all of us virtual. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Ray.
This is Doris Ray, and I'm representing the Disability Advisory Commission.
Thank you. Commissioner McIntyre.
Joe McIntyre, representing Climate Change, Energy and Environment Commission.
Thank you. Commissioner Schneider.
Cynthia Schneider, representing the Commission on Aging.
Thank you. Mr. Weaver.
Don Weber, representing Waverly Hills Civic Association.
Thank you, Mr. Weber, and apologies for mispronouncing your name. Ms. Walker.
Andrea Walker, Pedestrian Advisory Committee, but I'm also a member of the Commission on Aging.
Thank you, Commissioner Walker. All right. Reminder to folks to lower your virtual hand once you've introduced yourself. 50 members of staff are joining us electronically. You can raise your virtual hands. Ms. Brown.
Hi, good evening. My name is Kelly Brown and I'm with the Planning Division.
You. Ms. De La Barrera.
Hi, I'm Angie De La Barrera, and I'm with the Transportation Division.
Mr. Rick Ochea.
Hi, good evening. I'm Sergio Ricochea, and I'm representing Traffic Engineering and Operations.
You. Anybody else on staff that I left out? I know we have a number of other folks who are joining us electronically. I think in the interest of time, might try to move along in our agenda. If you are making public comment, we would encourage you to introduce yourself at that time. So we do thank you for all the public attendance this evening. We appreciate that. So let me just set a little bit of ground rules of what we're here to do. Set the stage a little bit, and then I want to turn it over to Ms. Rose for a staff presentation, followed by applicant and certainly the Cleveland presentation as well. So this is a tier 2 study being for the special block for the Sunrise parcel. We are here to evaluate whether it is in the realm of possibility to consider these changes at the Sunrise parcel, and whether we would think it appropriate to eventually allow a site plan to be filed. So this is high level discussion here to think about broad topics, passing, height, general topics. What you won't hear tonight is where the front door is, where the actual loading is going to be, actually how many cars are coming in and out of this site. And I know that is a concern of many of the folks in this room. A lot of those topics, as Ms. Rose will probably walk through, are site plan concerns. So it is not to say that they are not ones that we would cover. We certainly would, but they may not be covered this evening. So, and those are concerns that we as planning commissioners and members of the process take seriously, and are things that we would address at that time. So we want to make sure you know that there are things that we're not brushing aside. There are things that we would cover, but they would not be covered this evening. So I want to cover that. As I said, Ms. Rose is going to walk through a staff presentation. Applicant's going to have 5 minutes. The neighborhood have five minutes to do the presentation. That's how we're going to structure it. The neighborhood is also a member at the table and can certainly ask questions outside of your presentation. Okay, this is to do high level presentation, and your presentation has been shared, both the one in November and then the one that shared with us with staff yesterday. It has been posted. So with that out of the way, I've talked way too much. I'll pass it over to Ms. Rhodes' presentation. We're going to hold discussion until after Ms. Rhodes.
My name is Margaret Rhodes, and I'm with the Planning Division. And please, if you're virtual and you cannot hear us, please let us know. I will try to be brief. So as you can see, there are a number of slides to get through. So we'll start with background information. We'll move on to existing conditions, the results of the community engagement session that we had. We'll look at the proposed guiding planning principles, our refined massing scenarios. We're going to turn it over to Department of Environmental Services staff for a preliminary transportation analysis. And then we'll conclude with some discussion suggestions for the LRTC discussion. So to start this presentation, we will quickly cover the background information for the special study process. So you can see the policy for consideration of general land use plan amendments unanticipated by previous planning efforts was adopted by the county board in 2008. This policy calls for a community review process in those instances where there is either no adopted plan or where the request is in an area where it would be inconsistent with a relevant adopted plan. Special GLUP studies evaluate the appropriateness of the requested GLUP or general land use plan change and what GLUP category or categories may be most appropriate. So in sharing this information, I want to highlight that there have been questions from the community about spot zoning and whether the county is conducting spot zoning and considering applications that differ from the existing GLUP and the existing zoning. And it is important to understand that this is not spot zoning. Many areas of the county, including this site, are never planned, but rather designated based on the existing zoning or land use at the time the general land use plan was adopted back in 1961. I'm not sure.
If not,
Actually, it might be on your display. Might have to go full screen. for the rest of us to see it. The left-hand corner where it says view.
Well, while we're sorting that out, I'm gonna continue. This is also available online. We've posted it on both the Sunrise Special General Land Use Plan Study webpage, which you can find through a Google search on the Arlington County webpage. And it's also on the Long Range Planning Committee and the Planning Commission webpage, which you can Google under our LRPC if you're not able to easily view the slides, but luckily some of our participants can see them. Picking back up where I was, the general land use plan was originally adopted way back in 1961. Special general land use process is a county board adopted policy, as we saw. It was adopted in 2008, and it provides an approach for considering the land use vision for individual sites or small areas. And whether it allows us to evaluate whether or not that land use vision might be appropriate given the lack of previous focused attention or study for the subject area, such as through a sector plan, a small area plan, or revitalization plan, or some other planning process. If through the study, the county board, who's the ultimate decider, decides that changing the land use vision would be appropriate, then an application can come forward with a request to change the land use vision and rezoning that is consistent with that land use vision. So we are actually talking about the vision for this area. Therefore, this is not flat zoning. So the special general land use plan study consists of 2 review phases. The tier 1, which we've already concluded, which determines whether a full special general land use plan study or some other kind of review process is appropriate. And then if the initial review finds that a special GLUF study should proceed, then staff would conduct what we're doing now, the full tier 2 study. At the tier 1 meeting for this site, it was determined that yes, a full review was warranted for this site. And the full study is what results in a study document and a recommendation to the Planning Commission and the County Board to advertise or not to advertise a GLUP amendment. And we would also bring forward a study document if it advances to that stage. These staff recommendations in the study document are then reviewed and considered by the Planning Commission and County Board. If a new general land use plan designation is deemed within the realm of consideration by the County Board, then a future site plan could be submitted, and the site plan would be reviewed against the guidance in our study document by the site plan review committee. And equity is something that we have used to develop and review our recommendations. And the engagement outreach that we have done and the analysis have been crafted with attention to equity throughout the process. And next, we will review the background for the Sunrise Special GLUF study. Here you can see the site, which is situated at the intersection of North Glebe Road and 20th Street North, a few blocks south of Langston Boulevard. You can see it's located here on Glebe Road and Arterial. And the site includes the existing Sunrise parcel and 2 adjacent R6 parcels. One right along 20th Street, a little strip, and then one that is currently occupied with a single family. The requested amendment is from low residential 1 to 10 units per acre to low medium residential 16 to 36 units per acre. And there is the potential for a future request of an associated rezoning from R6 to R818. And the rezoning would be examined at a future point concurrent with a potential site plan application if it advances that way. And GLUF and zoning amendments are needed to support expansion of the elder care use, For elder care, it's now a non-conforming use based on some changes to the zoning ordinance.
Good question.
We're holding questions.
We're holding questions to the end.
So for the tier 2 study, we're looking at the appropriateness of low, medium residential. And we're studying, and I think this is where there was some confusion. We are studying, because this is a high level general land use plan study, we are looking at the uses, the range of uses, density and height permitted in the zoning district associated with the low, medium residential land use. So although the application was for elder care, doing our due diligence as a group here, we need to look at multiple uses. So that hence the modeling of both the multifamily and the elder care use. So the three-dimensional modeling of the existing conditions and the proposed designation and what that would allow, what will be coming up in the presentation. And during the tier 2, and we're bringing up some of the questions that were raised in the tier 1 review. Some of those issues that were raised were building scale, massing of materials, that kind of pedestrian level ground floor environment, landscaping, safety, and then environmental issues including sustainability and stormwater management. And there have been some questions about the timing of the submission of the tier 2 application. And staff has reviewed the records, and the applicant paid for the tier 2 submission, but we did not have a formal tier 2 letter that was submitted. However, staff had already had all the information required for the tier 2 application checklist. And that had come in with the tier 1 application. So no additional information was needed for staff to proceed with the review as recommended by the LRPC at the LRPC tier 1 meeting. And given that the process guide is administrative and procedural as opposed to regulatory, and no additional information was needed to proceed with tier 2, we'd already gotten the full transportation analysis, etc. Staff will be evaluating the need to have tier 2 application letters in the future as we look at potential process updates, see what may be needed in terms of process updates. And I'll just also note that the scope of this study includes addressing issues raised, as I mentioned, during the tier 1 review, and the staff presentation addresses those areas of concern for the proposed guiding principles. So we'll talk about that a little bit more further along in the presentation. And then, I'll also just note that should the application advance to site plan review committee review, there would be more reviews, conditions, and regulations to address some of the more detailed concerns that have been raised over email by the neighborhood, such as engineering design, stormwater mitigation, etc. Next part of the presentation reviews very quickly the existing conditions for the study area. So here we can see an excerpt from the general land use plan. The subject site is outlined there in blue. The general land use plan establishes the county's land use vision. This slide identifies the existing GLEP designations for the site and then in the area surrounding the subject site. You can see across from the site is the Muse site, which is designated public in the light green now, but we might be addressing that inconsistency as it is actually occupied with low residential 1 to 10 units per acre housing development. You can see there is low medium residential. Let's see, there is low medium residential adjacent to low residential in this map, in this section. This slide identifies the current zoning districts near the subject site. Subject site is R6. And here you can see the zoning districts that are typically associated with that low medium residential GLEP designation. And we're going to be looking at the R818 zoning district, which is intended for townhouse and multifamily residential with elder care uses such as nursing homes, continuing care retirement communities, assisted living facilities permitted by site plan. for additional comprehensive plan guidance for this area, we looked at the Affordable Housing Master Plan, which is relevant because it calls for allowing Arlington residents to age in the community and provide supports that they can do that. And then we also looked at the guidance of the Master Transportation Plan. North Glebe Road is classified as an arterial, and there is frequent bus and transit service along North Glebe Road in this area. We'll talk more about transportation a little bit. Existing conditions. So in addition to the existing adopted guidance, policy guidance, there's guidance for this area, which is informed by the existing site conditions. Here we have a site analysis overview. You can see the subject site towards the center of the screen. And you can see the observed land uses, public spaces, transit, bicycle infrastructure, and tree canopy in the vicinity of the study area. And next, we'll look at the results of our community engagement survey. We had a lot of participation in the community engagement survey. It ran for a number of weeks. It was extended past the initial anticipated length of the study to allow for additional comment. We've received 144 individual responses. And if you want to look at all of the individual responses, we have posted a PDF of all that raw data on the project webpage. As you can see from the community engagement session overview, we asked, which of the preliminary massing scenarios do you believe best responds to the proposed building planning guidance, the proposed guiding planning principles? And, you know, the majority certainly supported the 4-story option. As for the preference for the location of the lowest heights on the site, the preference was for the property boundary to the west. One of the other questions we asked, most of the other questions that we have here dealt with the proposed planning principles. You can see there was support for each one of the planning principles. So 74%, 74 out of the total were supporting this, ensure that building scale, massing, and materials complement the surrounding area. There was a strong support for provide for attractive and welcoming pedestrian level conditions through tree conservation, landscaping, other biophilic design elements, and underground parking. There is resounding support for enhanced access, connectivity, and safety for users of all modes of travel in and around the site. There is also strong support for prioritizing sustainability and stormwater best practices. For the open-ended responses, we've grouped them based on the total number of responses for each area. So there was a lot of interest, as one would imagine, regarding transportation and land use, site building and design. There were also a number of comments on the environment, some comments on the planning process, the elementary school. I've had no concerns, construction and displacement, racial equity, fire safety, and public art were also topics that were discussed. In addition to the responses that we got through the online community engagement survey, we also heard directly from the president of the Gleewood Civic Association identifying some of these transportation concerns, pedestrian crossings, access and loading, with issues potentially with delivery and landscaping trucks, clear passage, emergency vehicles, etc. And then apparently there is pickup and drop-off activity occurring for the nearby elementary school on 20th Street. Now that we've covered the existing conditions, we're going to look at the proposed guiding planning principles. So the proposed guiding planning principles that we've developed are intended to provide high-level, context-sensitive guidance for this site. They're intended to be, as I said, high-level, and they were informed by both the adopted plan guidance that we just looked at and by the input that we garnered through the Tier 1 LRPC meeting and the community engagement session. The principles have remained unchanged from those that you saw during the community engagement session, as the input received during that engagement session confirmed their validity. Again, these are the principles which I had gone over in the context of the community engagement results. And then for more specific areas where we've heard people would like to see more specific guidance, like parking, stormwater management, etc. Again, as Commissioner Schroll mentioned, those are the types of things that would be addressed if this was advanced to site plan review. Those more fine-grained. Now look at the refined massing scenarios. And these were refined based on, again, that input that we received at the LRPC meeting and through the community engagement session. They illustrate, as I mentioned before, a range of height and massing options under the R18 zoning district for elder care and multifamily uses. Again, we have a responsibility to show the range of potential uses, height, and density. We are not trying to use these to convey staff's preferred options. We are trying to explore the range of uses, density, and heights associated with this area so that we all have an understanding of that. And again, these are based on the input we've received. And it's important to note that lower building heights and or tables could be recommended if that's the feedback that, some of the feedback that we hear at this meeting. The modeling assumptions, I don't want to go over these in detail, but they're fairly general. We're assuming underground parking. We're assuming access off of 20th Street. We made unit assumptions for elder care and multifamily to try and capture the common areas for those. And we would propose that there be greater height and massing towards the arterial Glebe Road, and then less towards the residential structures. And then the footprint that we designed was try and preserve the greatest number of trees on site. And then in terms of the height, the lower 4-story and higher 6-story building height scenarios, again, illustrate that range of heights that are potential. And then in terms of the density that we modeled, we did one scenario with the base site plan density, and then we did two with a modest 0.25 bonus density, which could allow for a green building initiative or affordable housing incentive. But again, none of the density and none of the bonus, etc., is to be decided here. That would be something, if this was to advance the site plan, that would be discussed in my. So again, these are just illustrative models, illustrative model of what's currently there. This, however, does not include those two additional parcels I mentioned. You can see one of them in sort of the gray area right here, and then the next parcel is there. So this is scenario one. This is scenario one. And we're seeing here a 4-story building with no bonus density. And the maximum elder care height, you can see here, and then for RA 1426, it's a 60-foot maximum. But we're showing here 45 to 50 with the most of the height up against Glebe Road. Okay. You can ignore me. Sound better that way. So this is the 4-story building scenario with the bonus density. Here you can see it goes from 3 stories to 4 stories, and then it stays at 4 onto Glebe Road. This is the 5-story building option with bonus density. 3 stories to 3 stories to 5 stories. Treated before it was Yeah, sorry about that. You can see here.
Can you guys repeat that?
Yeah.
Sure. Sure. Let me go back to this one.
Somebody else calling in.
Please mute yourself if this is coming from your audio.
So, we can look at these, not sure when I click.
Well, it's not really.
So, I'll let myself.
Margaret, would it be helpful if I tried to share my screen?
Sure.
Okay,
Thank you, Ms. Brown.
sure.
I'm gonna stop sharing.
Share the patience.
We're on slide 44, Kelly. Great, thanks, Kelly. So scenario 1 is a 4-story building with no bonus density. The greater height is up along Glebe Road. Scenario 2, go to the next slide, is a 4-story building with bonus density, that small amount of bonus density that could allow for green building initiative or affordable housing or other bonus. If there was a desire for that, if this was to advance the site plan review process. You can see here it's starting further down 20th Street. You've got 3 stories, then moving to 4 stories, and 4 stories coming around along Glebe Road. This is a 5-story scenario. Is the next one, scenario 3, with again that bonus density. And you can see it's 3 stories further down 20th Street, keeping 3 stories through the middle of the building, and then moving up to 5 stories along Glebe Road. Next slide is the proposed planning principles and massing scenarios and how they relate to one another. So for the first scenario, you can see the 4-story building would have less height, but may cover more of the site. And the building in all these scenarios would be, we would recommend that it would step down towards the surrounding houses. Scenario 2, a 4-story building similar to what's in scenario 1, but with that bonus density we discussed. And then scenario 3, the building would, with the greater height, could cover less of the site with a smaller footprint, while achieving the same number of units. And then for the 3 scenarios related to the ground story plane, tree conservation, landscaping, etc. For scenarios 1 and 2, with the lower heights, the building would occupy likely a greater portion of the site, allowing for less green space. Whereas with a massing along Glebe Road and additional massing, there might be an opportunity for more green space. We go to the next slide. We can see with regards to the transportation connectivity planning principle, for all of these, we're presuming that access would be off 20th Street. With, for the bonus scenarios, potentially some limited access off of North Glebe Road. Other recommendations, more specific, would be addressed in the study document that we've been preparing. And then there would also be a discussion of stormwater and sustainability in the study document. And then given the input on the next, sorry, if we go back one slide to the preferred massing scenarios, given the input we've received from the LRPC, community, staff believes that all three of the scenarios I just showed are responsive to the proposed guiding principles. And scenarios 2 and 3 both allow for bonus density to realize community benefits that could potentially be sought, such as green building benefits. And then of these two scenarios with the bonus density, scenario 3 would allow for the most open space, with that building mass being concentrated up along North Glebe Road. And staff does not recommend that building height exceed 5 stories in any scenario given the context. And then I'm going to turn it over to Sergio for the preliminary transportation analysis.
Thanks, Margaret. Could you possibly fix the display settings? I have some tables that it might be hard to read some of the numbers. Thank you. I firstly wanted to start off with just resources and assumptions we made for projecting these trips. In the next slide, you'll see that our main resource is an industry standard resource. It's the trip generation manual, and the county has the latest edition, which helps staff project trips not only for vehicles, but for pedestrians, transit, cyclists, and motorists. Some of the assumptions that we made for this site was that it is not close to rail transit. Typically, close to rail transit is within half a mile. This site is just over a mile from the nearest metro station. And then we used data sets that were for the areas of the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic regions. And we applied mode shares for the North Arlington area. Mode shares meaning that in this area, we see more motorists rather than transit users or walkers. But if you go to other areas like Ballston or Columbia Pike, you might see more transit users rather than motorists. Lastly, for the assumptions, multifamily residential, we considered as a producer of trips, and you'll see this in the tables as it's during the morning, there's more trips leaving the site, and then in the PM, you will see more trips are coming into the site. For the assisted living scenario, we decided that one is an attractor of trips because it has staff, visitors, and services that go to the site. So in the morning, you'll see more trips headed towards the site, and then in the PM, more trips are leaving the site. What's on the presentation right now is scenario 1. This is what was provided by CPHD. And for multifamily housing, we were provided 77 dwelling units. And then for the assisted living, we were provided the number of 128 beds. In summary, multifamily would produce 19 vehicle trips during the morning and then 28 vehicle trips during the PM. Meanwhile, assisted living would provide 22 vehicle trips in the morning and then 29 vehicle trips in the PM. In the chart, you can also see some of the projective active trips. So these are the ones that people may use for transit, bike, or walking to the site. For scenarios 2 and 3, it's a slightly higher intense use. We were provided 77 dwelling units for the multifamily and 128 beds for the assisted living. AM, during the peak hour, we are seeing that there will be 19 vehicle trips for the site, and then in the PM, it would be 28. I'm sorry, that's scenario 1. AM, and for both land uses during the AM, it projected out to be 25 vehicle trips in the morning. And then for PM, it was 32 vehicle trips for multifamily and then 34 vehicle trips for elder care. And there's also some of the active trips there that you can see. The next slide just summarizes some of these peak hour trips in one slide for all scenarios. Lastly, in summary, with these trips, just for this site, we do not foresee that this development would require its own entrance off of Glebe Road. This is mostly to comply with some of the county standards and also to keep Glebe Road operational and just safe as well. As you know, if you provide some type of driveway access there, lefts out nearby 20th Street could become some conflict point if not, signalized well, or if there's not enough sight distance. So those are some of the factors we consider. And also VDOT is the owner of Glebe Road, so a lot of their access management standards would require that some access be off 20th Street. If one were to be provided off Glebe Road, it would have to be some type of restricted access, as in a right in, right out scenario. Our recommendations for this site and the developer is to submit a multimodal traffic assessment. So that assessment will capture some of the existing residential trips on 20th Street. We know that there's around 30 single-family homes there, and also we've heard that there's some pickup and drop-off during APS. So the developer would have to collect traffic counts just to capture what's happening on 20th Street today. On top of that, they would also put the projected site trips just to complete the picture of the impact of this site with the existing traffic on 20th Street to 20th Street and also to Glebe Road. Some additional recommendations are that we would urge the developer to internalize parking and loading onto their site. We've heard a lot from the residents about operations happening on the roadway or even in private property. To the right, there's an example of a Sunrise development in Burke, Virginia. We think that this one did a good job in the design of incorporating loading, pickup and drop off, and then even parking for visitors all into one site. Lastly, a lot of site plans will have community benefits, and what we're seeking from this type of site plan is that it should assist with formalizing 20th Street North. Currently, as you make a right or left turn onto 20th Street North, you will notice that curb and gutter are lacking, sidewalk connections are lacking as well. They kind of disappear after maybe 100 feet of getting into 20th Street. So some of these nice additions could help with drainage and also prevent vehicles from doing these operations on private property.
How large is that site in Burke?
So
Are we not taking that question? Because that's very relevant.
So
I think, to
the
the study.
discussion right now is if you have questions.
Oh,
to
I'm
that,
sorry. I just wondered how
Yeah.
large that.
I'll ask the question.
That's insane. I mean, that's gotta be almost 3 acres. It's just not
I
comparable.
understand that you have that question, but it's not the time to blurt out questions.
Oh, I just thought it's
Not-
funny.
So,
Does that conclude?
Kelly, if you could go to the final slide. So these are, the LRPC suggested discussion topics that staff, we would like your input on. So does the LRPC concur with the proposed low medium residential GLEP designation? Does the LRPC concur with the proposed guiding principles? Are there any additional principles that might be needed? Does the LRPC concur with the recommended massing scenarios? And which building height does the LRPC think is most appropriate? And where on this site should the greatest heights be located and where should it taper down? So those are some things that we would like to see, have your feedback on tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, staff, for your presentation. We will come back to these questions and others to the applicant for your presentation, Mr. McGraw.
Great, thank
You have 5 minutes. With all your
I just need to share and bring up the PowerPoint. Wonderful. Okay. Well, first of all, thank you everyone for being here tonight, both in person and virtual. As I said before, I'm Clyde McGraw. I'm Vice President of Real Estate for Sunrise Senior Living. We have Ben Simon from our development group and Kedrick Whitmore, who's our land use counsel from Arlington. At Sunrise, we are a mission-based organization, so our mission is to champion quality of life for all seniors. We also have a forward-looking vision statement, which is to create the preferred lifestyle for enjoying longer, healthier, happier lives. We're one of the largest providers of senior housing in North America, and we specialize in assisted living and memory care. So assisted living is for seniors that need help with activities of daily living. That's dressing, bathing, using the bathroom, meals, mobility, and for seniors with memory impairments, for example, Alzheimer's. Sunrise of Arlington was actually our very first purpose-built Sunrise of the nearly 300 that we operate today, which is something that we are extremely proud of. As Ms. Rhodes said, and thank you very much, Ms. Rhodes, for your presentation, the site is at the corner of 20th and Glebe, just south of Langston. When we take a look at Arlington County, we find that there's a huge imbalance between the supply and demand of assisted living and memory care in the immediate area. In fact, there's not been a new senior housing building built in Arlington County in 20 years. When we look at just the area right around the existing Sunrise, the 3-mile ring, we find that there's an imbalance of about 1,000 units of need for assisted living versus supply. For memory care, we find there's about a 600-unit imbalance between a need for memory care and what's actually available today. So there's this huge imbalance, and as our population continues to grow, that imbalance is going to get more. Looking at this existing Sunrise, as I mentioned, it's our very first personal Sunrise, and we're very proud of. But unfortunately, the building is obsolete at this point. The units are too small, the bathrooms are too small, the hallways are too narrow. There's too little common space. As I'm sure everyone in this room can imagine, over 40 years have been great changes in the design of senior housing, and unfortunately, the building is today obsolete. Looking at the existing site plan, you can see the outlined existing building, kind of the triangle shape here, the surface parking lot, excuse me, and also the residential lot next door that we own. When speaking with many of our neighbors, the two major issues that we've heard are, number one, issues with parking and loading with the site, and number two, issues with stormwater management, which seems to be a problem in this area of Arlington. We would propose building a new Sunrise on the same location where one exists today. This will allow us to build a brand new state-of-the-art facility with slightly more units. We'll also be able to help solve some of the issues that we've heard from the neighbors, including having all of our parking underground in a garage to help relieve some of the pressure on 20th Street in the neighborhood, as well as having a dedicated loading zone. In addition, when the building was built originally, I doubt there were stormwater management requirements, or if there were, they were minimal. Obviously, today we would put into place the highest requirements that Arlington County would have. Just a quick item on procedure. We are here for a tier 2 study, as Mr. Rhodes said. 3 requirements for us being paying the fee, which we did, providing a transportation analysis, which we also did, and providing any other information that staff requires. There was no further request for information. That's why we're here today. I did just want to mention, I did actually reach out multiple times to leadership of both Waverly Hills and Gleewood associations in preparation for this meeting. Unfortunately, I never heard back from any leadership. I also actually reached out to Mr. Sauter multiple times over the last, I guess it's probably over a year ago now. I also never heard back from him, unfortunately. That being said, I've met with many of the neighbors. Very happy to meet with any of you anytime and have a conversation. I did just want to point out here, there's a number of frequently asked questions we've heard regarding increases in density, transitions, structural impacts, traffic, stormwater management, spot zoning. We're happy to get into details on any of those. And finally, multifamily use. We have no interest in multifamily. We are a senior housing operator, and so I just want to make that clear for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McGraw. Mr. Sauter, take your presentation up. We'll have 5 minutes as well.
My name is John Sauter. I'm representing Gleewood. We're going to look at Sunrise of today and our expectations. This is Sunrise, the existing condition. One of the questions that we have and one of the expectations that we have, I'm going to go to the second item, is we expect redevelopment to achieve 36 years ago. One of the requirements in the initial application checklist was a detailed explanation that addresses consistency with the surrounding property. Not find that in tier 1. Second thing I'm going to address is just following the special bluff study process in general. This is the letter that included your review. In that letter, Sunrise is explicitly instructed to submit their application for a bluff study. This letter is dated December 6th. The county said that everything that Sunrise had already submitted was acceptable. It met all the requirements of the checklist. We don't see the consistency with the community. So the second thing is the applicant is instructed to file the full bluff study, and in the tier 2 process, the full bluff study, how that is done is here. We have no record of the full bluff application. We do have a record of the tier 1 report. The tier 2 application letter is dated July 29th. This is the same day as the tier 1 revised application. This date predates the date at which the study was completed. Transparency of multifamily option with higher unit counts. We don't know where this came from, but this is significantly different than what the applicant asked for. I've been back and forth with county applications on this. We just don't know why it's there. We don't know where it came from. There's been a little bit of explanation. You can see there's a ton of use cases for this zoning. We don't know why multifamily rest significantly impacts the. These are entirely two different categories. One thing that we're aware of is once the bluff study is amended, even if the property is sold off, that amendment doesn't go back through. That's true. It's a question of the county. So once the property is amended, once the bluff study is done, if the property is sold off, it's not like it's undone. This is the proposed use. Here's exactly what the applicant said. We don't know. Just an issue of transparency. I'm sorry, I'll speak up louder. Thank you. The online engagement session was a YouTube video. It was not really what we would call engagement. It had no opportunity for the community. Then a survey was issued. The survey was very problematic. It made us rather irate because it had sort of a feel of asking questions that we could all agree with. And that sort of derives, that is not the same as occurrence. Just because we agree with all the principles in the survey does not mean we agree with the project as a whole. That's one. County. New unaddressed resident concerns. So in this memorandum, there's no mention of that produced. Chair noted that the review should address the concerns of the residents. I feel like that was really inadequately handled. Especially with the YouTube video, there was no opportunity for the community to engage. Here's your YouTube video and here's your survey. And the survey is driving you towards certain responses that we could all agree upon. The issue of spot zoning is one that was a head scratcher for us. The one thing that we will call out is that Sunrise is getting an exceptionally high increase in density that is not offered to the properties adjacent, specifically the outline. All that went out, but that property adheres to the 30 acre. Sure that they accommodate seniors. Sure that they don't. So they didn't get any of those benefits. I think you all made your point. I just kind of really draw out right here that Avalon does not have benefits. Conclusions. We want the process to be followed. We want the process to be transparent. We want the process to make sure that new concerns are not introduced, that the concerns that have already been brought up are addressed. New one we had. We want the spot zoning thing more scrutinized, and we believe.
Thank you, Mr. Sutter. Okay. The discussion is now with the members of the LRPC, both at the table and then those participating online. This Ruth, do you mind putting discussion at the line? Sure, we will have some things probably planned that as well. Yeah.
So the first recommended question was, does the LRPC concur with the proposed low-medium residential club designation?
Yeah, I could start off. My understanding is that right now it's zoned R6, and that's more of an artifact of that it was, this facility was allowed in that zone when it was built, but subsequently the zoning was changed, and it's now a non-conforming use. So regardless of anything where it's appropriate for the zoning to change, to bring it, we'd want to bring it into compliance for anything here other than single-family houses. Is that correct?
Yeah, if there was, because it's a non-conforming use, if there was, say, a hurricane that wiped it out today, it could not be rebuilt.
It's a legally non-conforming.
Legally
Right,
non-conforming.
That's incorrect. There is a whole section of the Arlington County zone that allows a property to be rebuilt in the event of. That is in.
Right, but if somebody else came in and took it, I mean, the point is, the zoning is no longer correct for what the use is.
But
So
it can
would
stand
be-
as used.
But it still is not correct, so it could be changed. The club designation for this, is the club designation still appropriate for this use after that zoning change? Because the density for our zones is like 1 to 10. And this is more than 1 to 10, isn't it?
Our zone, so you can have low residential 1 to 10, and then there's also slightly higher low residential category. But I think you know, the request was for the low medium residential, which would correspond to the R818. So I think that's the question for the LRPC is R6 and low residential still the appropriate category here, or should something like low medium residential?
And there's also a couple of other sites that be part of the cleanup. There's a public site that actually has houses on it now. So sort of the flip of this, that those
Right.
houses are zoning.
There's an inconsistency across the street with the Muse, and that's designated public. The county does not own that land. The county has no plans in our public spaces master plan or any other document of public use, like a park or something in that area. It's occupied now with houses, so that would be a cleanup that we could do as
What
part of it.
designation for that is incorrect also.
Correct.
Okay, so
Public is not correct for those houses there.
what we're looking at is a club designation really for both parcels is not up to date. It's not correct for the uses either existing or proposed.
Correct.
Thank you.
Before we dive too deeply into this, I did want to take one step back on our agenda here and just do kind of questions, just for clarification. Mr. Sauer, I think you had some questions.
I did.
And so let's just do questions. Again, this is around the table here. Other folks have questions. We'll try to endeavor to answer later.
Yeah, the original R6 was a special use. Anything were to happen to that property, right, it could be rebuilt from the original height. That is in section 16. I want to make sure that's perfect there. I did want to bring up Arlington County said you have everything you need as a tier 1 application. Where does the applicant address showing consistency?
Can I answer that? I think we should step back on some of this and talk about the full picture of the context here, because I think a lot of what's been presented is out of context and perhaps purposefully so. The guide that we're talking about here was adopted in 2019, and that establishes the tier 1 and the tier 2 glove study. We filed our tier 1 glove study in summer of 2021 in June. We made one amendment in July of 2020. That has been the application since the beginning. There have been no changes. There's been no change to our proposal. It has been the same since the beginning. Mr. Sauter, would you mind putting up your presentation again? And moving it to slide 7. So the reason I want to take a look at this is because this lays out what is asked for in a tier 2 glove study. And not surprisingly, this is not the full page. This page has been edited. The entirety of the page is not shown. And that's because the full page will tell you a tier 2 GLUB study requires 3 things. It requires the payment of a fee, it requires the provision of a traffic study, and it requires any other information required by the staff based on discussions with the applicant. We paid our fee, provided our traffic study, discussed with the staff, we're told we needed nothing else. That is all that is required by the black letter of the guidance. To suggest otherwise is demonstrably untrue and in bad faith. That is the black letter law of this.
So Mr. Sutter, could I ask you to slide down because they can't hear you on this road? I guess if you could, like, they need to have you under this mic here.
That's one. That's the black letter of what's written. 2 is past practice. There's been 1 special GLUB study with this manual. That was the Courthouse West study. What was filed with the Courthouse West study for tier 2 was a fee, traffic study, and no changes to the application because we talked with staff and they didn't need anything else. That is consistent with the past practice. Let me finish, please. So we're consistent with the letter of the law and we're consistent with past practice. Lastly, practically speaking, nothing has changed. Nothing's being hidden. Nothing's being obfuscated. We're ready to provide any information that you need. If anything has been deficient that we have proposed that you're not seeing, please let us know. We're happy to provide it.
Question goes to the county.
Mr. Sutter, you need to keep your voice up.
My question goes to the county about consistency with fourth.
Mr. Sutter, we provide information back and forth throughout the process, right? You understand that? So the fact that it's not in something filed 2 years ago does not mean it can't be provided.
I'm sorry, I didn't interrupt.
Question wasn't to you.
Yeah.
Ms. Rose.
In the letter, they addressed consistency with the surrounding area in the letter, and that's actually really something that we don't detail what that means. And this is, as we mentioned before, it's procedural, it's administrative, it's not in the, none of this process is in the county code. None of this process is in the zoning ordinance. It's not legally binding. This is just sort of a procedural guide. And so, it's very, as you yourself said, no, I would not use that word. I would say,
Here's the full page.
right,
Not the end.
subjective as to what constitutes demonstrating consistency surrounding area. That's something that we talked about in our presentation as staff. We looked at, what is the surrounding context? We went through the background information that you all saw. We went through the conditions. And then in our guiding principles, our very first guiding principle is to deal with that context and making sure that what is proposed, anything that's potentially proposed here would complement that surrounding area. So ensure building scale, massing, and materials complement the surrounding areas. You can see that on slide on page 38 of our presentation. So they were the application, all of the application materials were received by staff. So it sounds like you do not feel that their proposal is, I don't know what the word was that you used, consistent with the surrounding area, but that's something that we need to be discussing tonight. Are our guiding principles addressing that concern? Is there an additional guiding principle maybe that's needed? So that's exactly the kind of things that we'd like to talk about.
You're concerned about consistency around
And kind of while we're on raising guiding principles, Ms. Rhodes, I think one that we heard last time and have heard some concern throughout this process has been the concern about this parcel being developed for multifamily. I know that's not what the applicant is suggesting, but I know that's what we're hearing. And so I would suggest, in keeping with what we've heard for neighbors, but also other LRPC members, is adding that there be that strong preference for affordable senior living at this site.
And we're fine with that.
We can move on from this. We've expressed the fact that we're concerned about consistency. On from this. We have another question, which is just for clarity for everyone in the room. Bluff amendment goes through. Property is sold off. Could the property pursue anything under that RA18?
So allow me to speak to that, please. And you alluded to some of this in your presentation, and I think there's some misinformation that needs to be clarified. So at the termination of a special general land use plan study, as I noted, let's see, in the overview on the process, the study terminates with a study document prepared by staff, and it is brought to the Planning Commission and the County Board public hearings where everyone is urged to participate. And we bring forward either a request to advertise or a request not to advertise a potential general land use plan amendment. It then is discussed by the Planning Commission. They'll receive a report from the LRPC chair about these very meetings that we're here tonight, undertaking. And then it would advance with the Planning Commission recommendation to the county board. And then the county board is the decider. Staff is not the decider, LRPC is not the decider, PC is not the decider. It's the county board that would make a decision. And the decision is, and this is the nuance perhaps, but the decision is not to amend the general land use plan at that time.
I understand.
It is, so I want to make sure that everybody understands that the decision is the potential, let's say that we recommend there is a GLUP amendment. Is that potential GLUP amendment in the realm of consideration? Yes or no? At that juncture, let's say that GLUP category is then advertised. No action is taken. The general land use plan is not amended at that time. There are no amendments. It's merely advertised. And then the special GLUP study document is, finalized, et cetera. So should there at another juncture be a site plan application that comes forward, it would be evaluated against the recommendations of the study document and all of the, engagement that we've had. And then that application would then be reviewed by the site plan review committee, and then the planning commission of the county board. No change, again, still with all this process, no change to the general land use plan would be made at that time. If there is an appropriate site plan that it, seems to abide by the recommendations in the general land use plan and it goes through the site plan review committee process. At that time, it will be brought to the planning commission and the county board. The county board and the planning commission then the county board could potentially act on a series of actions. So at that time, if they thought it was appropriate, they could amend the general land use plan. They could approve a rezoning, and they could approve a site plan. But again, no GLUP amendment occurs as part of the LRPC process, and no GLUP amendment occurs as part of the SPRC process. It's only if there is an appropriate site plan. So for instance, if you raise concerns again about multifamily. So if, let's say in your scenario that I think you were alluding to, let's say Sunrise goes bankrupt and there's a residential developer that comes in, they would not necessarily get an approval of low medium residential because it sounds as though there's a recommendation from the chair, and I'm sure it's supported by you all, to add another principle to the study document addressing use. So a preference I'm hearing very strongly for elder care. So if, let's say, another proposal was to come forward for this site for, say, multifamily, it would be evaluated against the recommendation of the study document, which would say preference for elder care. And then it would need to go through the whole site plan review committee process. So all of these various commissioners, et cetera, that are here with us tonight, that Fleetwood, Waverly Hills, all have a chance to weigh in and say, this isn't consistent with what we were talking about, and this isn't consistent necessarily with the communities guides, et cetera.
My clarification to the question was they would not have to run the glove study again if they chose to do a site plan review that addressed something like multifamily because it is in this study. That's my clarification.
So there would be a principle, it sounds like, addressing elder care. If they were looking for something other than what potentially the outcome of this could be, then then it might need to be looked at again. But it would probably go to the site plan review committee, and then at that juncture, the site plan review committee and then the planning commission, the county board would evaluate against this, and of course, everyone would have that opportunity to weigh in and say, I don't like this, or whatever.
Sure, that's just like that's going to have to happen no matter what. And that the current study as it's done, reducing the multifamily option, and then raise that option.
So to clarify it, we're not actually introducing any uses. This is a general land use plan study. And so we're evaluating all of the uses, the range of heights, the range of density, et cetera, to make sure that everyone has a fulsome picture of what these categories could potentially look like.
But there are other uses in there as well. There's townhouse uses. That you only picked out multifamily to study.
And that is consistent with the R818 that was in the request, and it is on an arterial, et cetera. So, I don't think that, it could be any one of those.
So specifically multifamily.
We focused on multifamily as, what the worst case scenario, I guess, from your perspective, and in terms of transportation analysis, we looked at the highest level. We want to paint that picture of what that range is.
All right, so we have a question for Mr. Weber.
Yeah, I didn't see any slide that actually showed the existing tree canopy. I visited the site today. The mature large trees are along Glebe Road. None of the views that I saw showed those, which would be viewed from the across Glebe Road, best viewed across Glebe Road, opposite the star there. It would be informative to have that existing tree canopy shown with the various scenarios, but that was not shown. Just to see what tree canopy would be lost under the different scenarios. Does anyone have that view available?
This slide, one of the things that it shows is the tree canopy, but that is something that we could certainly address with some better visuals in the study document.
If you claim to show it 3D, that's what I'd like to see, like the actual thing. And there's a large white pine, several sycamores, and a oak along Glebe Road, and the existing scenarios don't appear to allow those trees to remain.
And I think it's important to point out, and you'll probably hear us, Mr. Weber, say this a few times tonight, that these don't reflect an actual proposal. So while they're potential massing models, it's hard to say that, when we ultimately come forward, this tree will be here, this tree will not. We just haven't designed the building yet. But
I was asking for an adequate treatment of the current conditions.
Makes sense.
I think something slightly different. We're going to miss Shane, and I will come back to you after other. Mr. Weber, anything else before I go to the things?
Not at this time.
Thank you, Ms. Haynes, or Commissioner Haynes.
Yeah, I would just like to second Mr. Weber's comments on that. And I noticed on the applicant's presentation that there's no mention of tree canopy on the frequently asked questions. So that might be something else they might want to add as well. Thank you.
Commissioner Haynes. All right, back to you, Mr. Stoner, and then I do want to move through our discussion.
Yeah, just the date of the transportation land use study, mid-COVID, schools closed. That probably should.
So I'd like to just respond to that very briefly. So the applicant provided a transportation analysis as part of their tier 1 application. which also satisfies that requirement for tier 2. Staff actually, as Sergio presented, runs our own transportation analysis. So we are actually looking at general models through ITE. So those are based on, and Sergio can probably explain it better than I can, but on those models. So it has no real relationship to actual, pandemic, post-pandemic, conditions, et cetera. And again, this is theoretical based on assumptions. So if this was to advance to a site plan application, the applicant would actually design the building, and then we'd actually know we would require a full multi-transportation analysis of that juncture. And that's when it would be really important to make sure that the time of the year, et cetera, is accounted for in that full multimodal transportation.
Okay. Let us move back to the discussion outline. Next item was the discussion of whether there's kind of concurrence with the proposed low, medium residential bluff designation. So we did hear some from Commissioner Lantelmi. I welcome other feedback, reactions to that proposal. Both generally supportive, not supportive. Sort of need to hear from some people out there on the LRPC what their reactions are. Ms. Ray. Commissioner Ray?
Yes, is you calling me?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, okay. I don't know whether this is an appropriate question now or whether there's a, and I'm having a hard time hearing in this hybrid format, but I was just curious about doing this redevelopment. I mean, it's important to have assisted living facilities and residences for seniors, and it's also I understand. My question here is, I understand now so there's something different from what I read, that there are going to be 77 multifamily residential units plus the 128. Did I hear that right? Assisted living units, and I'm curious about whether any of either of those housing types are going to be affordable and at what rates, because one of the things that would be a community benefit that's absolutely lacking in Arlington is affordable assisted living. And of course, we need to increase the number of affordable housing units anyway. And then the other thing I wanted to know is, are these assisted living units going to be an apartment type, or are they going to be a more nursing home type with a bedroom and a separate bathroom, and what accessibility level are they planned to be at?
So I was turned to Mr. McGraw. Some of the questions I think Commissioner Ray might be a little bit more specific than this process that we're at the moment, but I will turn to Mr. McGraw and see if you have.
Absolutely. So I think there were two questions I heard. The first was about affordable units here. So as of right now, when the building is not designed, we don't know what the final density or unit count will be. We are not proposing any affordable on-site units here at this juncture. I will say that Sunrise does do a number of things to try to make the units more affordable, one of which is we have a variety of unit sizes. So we have everything from 2 bedrooms, 1 bedrooms down to studios to make them more affordable. We also have at Sunrise, compared to some other senior living providers, a lot of sharing in our units, meaning that we have 2-bedroom units with 2 individuals that share it. That brings down the cost. And we find that makes it more affordable for people. The challenge with affordable housing and senior assisted living is you can discount the rent, but you can't discount the care for someone. So we find that by having a variety of room sizes and sharing, it does allow for a little bit more affordability. The other issue is frankly market forces, which is there hasn't been a new senior housing built in 20 years. There's just very limited supply. When you increase the supply, it tends to bring down the overall cost in the market. In terms of the design, this is what I think is called group living, which means that every individual or couple has their own, individual room with their bed, with a bathroom, but then there is communal dining space, communal kitchen, communal amenity space.
I also just like to add, just to the very beginning of your question, Commissioner Ray, there is no proposal for multifamily on the table. The applicant is proposing elder care, and when we model the scenarios, we model it as either multifamily or elder care, not both.
Thank you, Ms. Ray. Commissioner
Can I
Schneider.
ask one follow-up, please?
Yes.
And that is, what level assisted living is offered there? I mean, there are 4 levels of assisted living, so I just wondered what level.
I'm not sure if I follow what you mean by levels of assisted living, but Sunrise typically provides the highest level of assisted living available, short of skilled nursing.
Independent.
Yes. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Sure. If you mean, from the gamut of active adult, independent living, assisted living, or skilled nursing. Active adult is essentially an apartment building where you say you must be 55 or older to live here. That's not what this is. Independent living is for seniors in group living, but doesn't provide any care. That's not what this would be. Skilled nursing at the far spectrum is full-on medical care 24/7, which is not what this is. This is assisted living. This is for seniors that need assistance with activities of daily living. As I mentioned, bathing, dressing, using the bathroom, mobility, meals, for seniors with memory impairments like Alzheimer's. So that's our specialty, is assisted living and memory care, which is the same as what's on site today.
Thank you. Commissioner Schneider.
Yes, thank you. I would, on behalf of the Commission on Aging, I would just like to echo the concerns of Commissioner Ray about the need for affordable assisted living. And we raised this in a private meeting with Mr. McGraw, Mr. Whitmore, and his team, the Sunrise folks, about our hope that Sunrise will set aside some units as affordable. And I would like to remind the Sunrise folks, in their development in Old Town, the Sunrise of Old Town, they did set aside 2 units in that building as auxiliary grant units, which are for very low income persons.
Thank you, Commissioner Schneider. Okay, I do want to kind of get us back to see if there's any more comments on the proposed GLUP designation. If there aren't comments, we'll move on. I'll also sort of take the silence or interpret it as assent, but Mr. Sauer.
Yeah, does Arlington County track the vacancy of there? But in other words, is there any measure, like objective measure of the supply of senior housing in Arlington?
I don't know the answer to that. Ms. Rose, do you know that, or
No,
Ms.
we
Brown,
can
or anybody
research
else?
it.
Because I live across from Sunrise and don't believe.
Yeah, we do have a member from our housing commission. I wonder, Ms. Schneider, are you aware of that, Commissioner Schneider?
I'm sorry, I did not hear the question.
Question was whether the county tracks vacancies at assisted living facilities.
Or just senior living facilities in general?
Not formally, but informally is all I can say. So it's through various committee work, that information is tracked, but staff does not track it. County staff does not track it.
One more question. Has anybody from the LRPC or the Housing Division visited the site? Context of the site.
Ms. Ray, Ms. Ray, did you have another, or Commissioner Ray, did you have another question? On the topic of the kind of low medium residential? All right, so I'm not hearing any strong critique of the club designation, so we shall move on in our conversation. To the guiding principles. Already suggested one amendment.
I concur with that.
So again, that was for a strong preference for affordable senior living, and I think
Senior living.
Senior living. We can do senior living. I was just trying to encapsulate what we had heard, I think, previously, what we had tonight. But senior living. Any other amendments to the guiding principle? All right. Not seeing any hands. Let us move then to the massing scenarios. Ms. Rhodes, if you wouldn't mind putting up scenario 1 and 2 and 3. Yes, Mr. Sarli.
I have a few questions, if you could just walk me through a little bit the massing on this. So the first question is, why didn't the building sort of hold the edge of 3rd Street? 20th and Glebe? Is there a reason for that courtyard being set up in the center?
This is just one way that these buildings could be potentially developed. One of our other staff members, Pablo, did the modeling. I think the idea was that because the 20th Street is more of a residential street, maybe not to have such an urban edge would be maybe more appropriate here. And then the idea was to have the greater number of stories on Glebe Road. And right now there is a little bit of a setback there from Glebe Road. There's a wall and some elevation there on the edge. And then there is a little bit of a setback that you can see for the townhouses just to the north. But those are all things that could be discussed and addressed in the study document. What is the right setback? What is the right?
So I just want to make sure that there isn't some sort of intent on that, like, through the transportation or some analysis or some cause, and something that the community was interested in having. Because my first sort of blind approach to this site would have been to line the exterior and create like a bit of a buffer, or a bit space between the neighbors and the building. I agree that Glebe should have the highest, perhaps tapering a little bit towards it, but I don't think that's totally necessary given the nature and the fact that the neighbors are sort of, that's the back of their, so facing the public front of Glebe, I think makes sense. I think transitioning down as you go along 20th, I think makes sense. And then perhaps, I think there was some mention of underground parking. So I think, if I recall correctly, from an engineering perspective, given the grade, that could be used to your advantage. The fact that along Glebe, or at the beginning of 20th, there's this sort of lower level, which creates the opportunity to put that underground parking garage with less ramp, which builds in the efficiency, making sure that the street frontage along Glebe, and even 20th is adequate. So that's the one sort of reaction that I have right away. I think the height analyses are good, and I think you know, particularly if you can taper towards the neighbors, you could achieve sort of a good transition and even some noise buffering. You know, I think the one concern that I would have was with the existing canopy. I think unfortunately, you know, we're almost inversing the current situation with the new proposal. But I think creating that transition from sort of urban to suburban, you know, the party, that's a term of art for architecture, that's like the diagram, is sort of this L along the edge. So I think if staff could take a look at that and sort of pros and cons, and tapering towards the west.
Your voice is up.
Sorry, I think that's it for now, and I might react to some of the other comments that fellow commissioners make.
So, Commissioner Sarli, before I go away from you, do you have a preference among scenario 1, 2, 3? This one is
Ms. Rose just cannot stop talking about it. So I think, so the short answer is I think, no, I do not. And I think there's not enough of a contrast to cause me to have a strong preference one way or the other. I think it starts to become on the detail. One of the things that the existing structure has is it has a lot of scale and how should I say this? It has elements on the architecture that make it residential in flavor. And I think some of that can be brought back. But again, I think it really is on the design where you can transition from the more urban to the more residential in the building. I hesitate a little bit to encourage that too much because a lot of that stuff gets a little schmaltzy, a little tchotchke-ish. So you have to also avoid that. And I think at some point, letting the building be the building is almost a better thing as far as it relates to the neighborhood and as far as it sort of blending in. But I think, you know, I would react obviously with more detail and more preference once I see some more detailed drawings. I have to say for the applicant, the roof plan that's in your presentation is not particularly encouraging.
So,
just
Commissioner Sarli.
Sorry.
Yes. A little far afield on roof plans at LRPC.
Admittedly, but I think even from a massing stand, I think that diagram's a little bit sort of misleading. But that's my quick reaction.
Okay. I want to go to Commissioner Haynes and we'll come to you, Commissioner Haynes.
Thank you. Yeah. I get it that these are massing studies and that this is not the SPRC. I get all of that. But I think to the point that was made earlier, the fact that there are some mature trees along Glebe Road, and if one of the guiding principles is preservation, tree conservation, it seems that we really do need to be thinking about that. There's also another tree, a large tree right on 20th. And seems to me as we're thinking about the larger picture of, I'm fine with the higher density along Glebe Road, but it needs to be in the context of that tree preservation because they really are the worth preserving in that site. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Haynes. Commissioner McIntyre, I want to let you know that unfortunately C2, E2 is not on the adopted roster for this LRPC. That being said, we would encourage your comments during public comment, and if this is to go to SPRC, C2, E2 would certainly be an included commission at that stage. All right, Commissioner Lantelmi and then Mr. Webb.
Yeah, I'll concur with pretty much everything that Commissioner Sarli was saying. I don't have a preference in the scenarios other than to load up as much massing as possible along the road and shrink it down into the neighborhood as much as possible. Along Glebe, it is a very busy street. I think there actually would be some sound screening effects by the more massing you have there, the neighborhoods that go down the hill off of Glebe further down 20th Street. So I think that actually would work fine. But definitely Glebe is where the most of the massing should be. I also like the idea of the underground parking that'll free up presumably some open space. So, that's the direction I would go in this as a general principle with no specific preference for any of the various.
Sounded like more of a preference for 3, but if you're trying to move the massing there as
Yeah,
opposed to.
then that'd be fine.
One,
If that's consistent, then that's it.
or 2, I guess 2 would be. Mr. Weber.
I was just wondering if it were possible to share a picture I have on my screen of the view of the Glebe Road frontage. I don't know how to do that, but if you can tell me how I can do it right now.
I think we have a slide with that view.
I
We
don't
can
think
provide
just-
it.
I'd love to see it.
Ms. Brown or Ms. Rhodes?
Yeah. Just stand by. I'm looking for it.
Mr. Weber, anything else that you?
Well,
well,
looking at this picture, I'm reminded that the neither the current picture nor any of the scenarios picture the overhead wires, which are pretty prominent, and should be undergrounded in any civilized community. And those would inhibit any restoration of the canopy along Glebe Road. You don't show the very large white pine. It's about, I would guess 60 feet tall, right there. So that's what I'm getting at. And in addition, several sycamores and oaks there along Glebe Road. You're just showing the ground level. And thank you for showing the overhead wires, which need to be undergrounded in all roads in Arlington over time. They inhibit the tree canopy, and that has to be a component of what we're considering in terms of priority outcomes.
Thank you, Mr. Weber. Staff, are we able to get up another view or?
Yeah, I think Kelly's looking for a slide that shows the
Great.
sycamore.
Okay. As we're doing that, any other questions, comments on the massing scenarios, where the most appropriate height should be located? On that. So what I'm hearing is more height towards Glebe Road. Taper to this and take height mass. See different things. And taper to the community, both to the north and to the west. I'm hearing that folks are okay with low, medium residential, and that people support this additional guiding principle there that would, ask for senior living on this site, or that's preference for that there. We're also obviously hearing greater desire to see where the trees are, tree preservation, for kind of the older canopy on the site. Something that I think should be captured in the study document, and then certainly things that would, should be addressed if this is to go to a site plan, which is, strong concerns about parking, loading, stormwater management, and those are things that are addressed at that stage. Get more into that. Stormwater management is a big concern. Any applicant would have to address that. And the stormwater management requirements are much, as Mr. McGrath noted, are much higher than they were. Okay.
have a quick question.
Yes,
Slightly
sorry.
technical. Is R10T just to the north of that? Is that bid density? Is that
Also, I believe associated with, but I'll let Kelly answer that. Better.
Sorry, could you repeat the question one more time?
is R10T just to the north of the site? What's the term again? Middle, low, middle?
Is R10T north of the site?
What's the glove designation? Is it low, medium?
Well, R10T would be associated with low residential typically.
Low residential, I mean 1 to 10?
1 to 10 units per acre, that's right. Does that answer the question?
Yes.
Okay.
While we're on the topic of that, those structures are currently about 30 feet from the existing sunrise. And there's concern about the construction that may occur, the damage to the foundations of those structures. Proposed sunrise will go deeper into those properties. There's currently all of them will be. So there's a lot of concern about foundation damage, and there's a lot of concern about lack of sun. One of our neighbors is actually postponing the installation of
Mr. Chair, if I could just address, I can't comment on the solar panels, the building stop design. We don't know what height massing will be at this point. Regarding the structure, though, I will say, we've built almost 300 sunrises all across North America in a variety of different areas. So just an example, in the last couple of years, we've built new ones in Manhattan on East 56th Street, right at a corner immediately next to other buildings. And in Old Town Alexandria, we also built a brand new sunrise next to historic structures with a below-grade garage. In other words, we have extensive experience, a long roster of excellent structural engineers, so we're very confident that we can build a new structure here without damaging the property.
Yeah, there's a difference between building in Manhattan, where the other structures are very large and have deep foundations, than building next to a townhouse.
That's true. So actually in Old Town Alexandria, we had historic townhouses right next to our property that we built next to. We're able to keep all of them structurally complete, so I'm very confident.
Thank you. Ms. Walker, Commissioner Walker, I should say, and then I'd like to try to go to public comment as well. Commissioner Walker.
Yes, I just wanted to make sure that given sunrise, I'm just assuming that pedestrian access, including wheelchair access, is being considered along Glebe Road. I assume that's going to be part of a separate, discussion.
Yes, Commissioner Walker, that is part of the site plan review committee process. Site access, site circulation is a part of that discussion. And that would be something to bring up at that time.
Okay, thank you.
Great concerns or things like that would make things wheelchair accessible or accessible generally. Right. Right. Let us have a study on the list. Great. All right, we have 7 speakers, as was for public comment, as was previously mentioned. Public speakers will have 2 minutes. So Commissioner McIntyre, we will start with you.
Yeah, I'm kind of looking at it in terms of the overall structure is the massing that's being proposed is, and actually it's you're pulling down an old building, and the carbon emissions, and it's not that old of a building, is pretty the embedded carbon, and that needs to be considered as part of sustainability of not reusing existing structures. And then the footprints it seems almost impossible to preserve the trees in the open space that's there within the space, which is going to have issues related to stormwater management, as well as just deteriorating open spaces. And finally, I just comment is that, kind of living in the neighborhood and seeing it as the existing building really fits in well with the neighborhood. And I don't know that, what's proposed for the new building seems to be somewhat out of place for what's existing there now.
Thank you. My eyes are not. Our next public speaker is Ms. McKay.
Thank you. My comments there for distribute. So good evening to all. I'm Joanne McKee. My husband Bill and I are Sunrise Assisted Living's new next door neighbors. As the most immediately affected neighbors to the proposed changes and redevelopment, I implore you county commissioners and planners, come to our street, come to our home, and see the lay of the land. Envision for yourselves the impact of a structure that is double the size or even larger of the current footprint, or a story and more higher or taller on a barely 1 acre lot. Imagine how much impermeable roof and hard surface that will create. Remember that the site sits at the top of Lubber Run watershed. How can adding that much impermeable surface make any sense at all? Mature trees will be bulldozed to make way for development, and there will leave nothing to slow down the water or to absorb any excess water left in the soil. To this point, we haven't felt that the Gulf amendment process has been transparent at all, or that we've had the benefit of county planners' attention to our concerns. This proposal will change our neighborhood forever. Does that not deserve a fair and impartial hearing from the powers that be? What is the point of participation in agreement or in dissent if the planners have already made a decision? We should be able to see what a typical unit layout of senior housing looks like, what the likely floor plan will be based on project Sunrise is currently building. We should have an explanation about why the entrance to the parking garage can only be on 20th Street and not on Glee. We deserve to know how much disruption to our daily lives will come from this. What are the trade-offs and the benefits? Right now, I don't see any benefits at all for our neighborhood. Certainly not for our home, which will be dwarfed by an overlarge neighbor and may end up serving as the drainage ditch for all the stormwater runoff from the top of the hill. Again, I invite all of you to come and have a look before you agree this is the right location for such a project. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McKee. Our next speaker is April Myers.
I don't know how I follow that. That was really good. Thank you so much, Joanne. I actually live, my family and I bought on Brandywine in 2018. We face the back of Sunrise currently. You guys have been excellent. Anytime there's been like a little issue, you guys have always been so responsive and wonderful. And part of the reason that we bought back there, well, first of all, I'm a realtor and I understand where good property values are and where good values are for your money. But part of the reason we bought back there is because we felt like Sunrise would be one. And that has completely changed my view of this. It makes me feel bad for the other families that live on the street that have also purchased in our neighborhood. So I really, really would love if you just, when you do redo this, if it does happen, that you consider your neighbors also to the west, because it really is going to affect our quality of life. So while you say you've reached out to the neighbors, I've never received a door knock from you. I do mailers all the time. I know how to reach people. I've never been reached out to you all, but I really just hope you all consider, really the impact this is going to have on the community. Plus, we also purchased in close proximity to Glebe Elementary, where if this happens, my son will no longer be able to walk to school, which he is going to be going to elementary school next year. So, it's unfortunate, the timing of all this, but we understand, not against development and not against improvement, but it just really, the footprint just doesn't make sense for the area and for the residential area that exists right now. So my piece. Did not mean to cry and get emotional.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Myers.
Yes.
Chris, our next speaker is Chris Barr.
Good evening. I'm a resident on 20th Street and I've been there for 28 years. I have coexisted, my wife and I and our son, we coexisted with, but I would not say that we loved having Sunrise on that property. I think Sunrise as it currently exists is maximizing the use of that property, any change whatsoever to increase the density of use of that property would be detrimental to everybody on 20th Street, anybody who goes to school at Glebe School, to the neighbors to the north, anybody who is going to have to come by that area on Glebe Road. It will just be extremely difficult. I would keep the zoning or the designation as R6. I would not increase it. And if I were the property owner, I would consider doing what you can with what you have. It's what everybody else does in Arlington. We modify from within. We increase the value using changes to our own property and maybe increasing the width of a hallway. We've done that at our house. We've increased the size of a room. That's what you do to improve value and your amenities. And then you'll potentially attract your clients. But I would not do it by doubling, tripling the number of units on site. That's just greed. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next public speaker is Lindsay Stuckey.
Hi, I'm Lindsay Stuckey. I've lived in Northern Virginia since I was 4 years old, 1996. I've lived in Plain, Vienna, and Arlington. If the name sounds familiar to you guys, my dad's actually Rob Stuckey at Carlisle. So I just have a quick question for you. What is the current occupancy rate at Sunrise?
It's actually confidential information. I can't share that. It is well occupied.
Okay, because that's just interesting to see. I also worked at JLL and Pulte Homes. And at JLL, I would package the OMs, as you know. So as you said, this is one of them. So if you were to get this zoning passed and say maximize the highest amount of units, this would be a pretty OM for Greystar, Avalon Bay. And what everyone here is concerned about is the integrity of the neighborhood. I'm now a realtor, residential, and so we are very much invested in and care about the integrity and the values of the neighborhood. Additionally, as you know, Pulte Homes has the senior living branch as well, and I helped with land acquisition there. So my other question is, I know with our zoning and our senior living, we had specification in the multifamily that it would be 55 plus, and I'm not seeing that here. So I'm wondering what is keeping you here at this location instead of flipping it?
Just want to make sure the question is, why are we staying in this location instead of?
Well, we just want to make sure you are staying here and that you
Yes.
are going to have the integrity and not flip it to, you know.
We developed this property. We built it ourselves 40 years ago. Plan on being here the long term. All the buildings that we build, we stay on and operate. We don't then bring on a different operator. It's an important part of our
Not
business
that,
model.
I'm saying scrapping it and like selling it to Greystar and saying, hey, we already got the zoning passed. There's no age restriction on it. And you can have this many units. This is the cap rate. And then you guys get a nice ROI because like you said, it's been bought and paid for over 40 years.
So I think and Margaret, I'm happy to let you answer this. The zoning doesn't change until an actual site plan is approved. So you couldn't just sell it to Greystar and say, go build multifamily. They would then have to go through the entire site plan review process that would reflect all this, saying it's supposed to be senior living. And I assume it would be just
Staff might not even accept it.
right.
The site plan.
Yeah, because that's just what I'm hearing a lot of in this room is that concern to maintain.
To be, and just to be totally clear, our intention is to stay here for the long term. We've been here for 40 years. We want to be here for another 100 years. We have no interest in selling to a multifamily developer or anyone else. We want to rezone so we can build a new Sunrise in the city.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Lucia Balcazar.
So my name is Lucia Balcazar. We just bought the house right next to April back in May. And so when we bought it, we sort of knew that Sunrise was planning to develop, but we weren't expecting, suddenly deal with a 6-story building or something as massive as we're seeing now. And I would just like to tell you to please consider the building's height in relation to the townhouses on the north boundary, because even the structure is already on higher ground relative to our townhouses. So, 4 stories would mean it's just something massive for us. And they're already flush against our townhouses, and they would block all of our sunlight. And I'm the neighbor that's postponing installing solar panels because that's what I was told by the Arlington Solar Co-op. So yeah, please consider that our access to clean energy and our right.
Thank you. I believe our last public speaker is Carl Selmeyer.
Hi, I'm Carl Settlemeyer. I'm a neighbor. I live on North 20th Street. Sunrise has been great for our neighbor's mother who just passed away and has been great for a friend's father. In that regard, I hold you guys in high esteem. But frankly, living at the bottom of a 2-block long cul-de-sac where your Cisco trucks frequently either illegally park in front of the building or get stuck down at the bottom of the hill, say nothing of the every single time your landscaping company is parked illegally in front of the fire hydrant. This exacerbates the problem that is not reflected adequately, in my view, in any of the staff presentation, which is the topography of that street. I looked at the topographic map that Arlington has on its website, and from what I can count, counting the bars, in a 50-foot span from the top of the hill down to Glebe Road, you are going down an 8 to 10-foot decline. At the top of the hill, which you can't see over, you can see what's in front of you on Glebe. Coming the other way, there is a, I believe, 400-foot run that descends 40 feet in elevation. That goes down into a street with a very narrow passage where sometimes only one vehicle at a time can pass. And also, when you mention in the staff presentation, the pickup and drop off at the elementary school, you're not accounting also for the heavy foot traffic in the morning around between 8:30 and 9 a.m. and between 3:30 and 4 p.m. when the school kids, their families, their dogs, their younger siblings are walking up from Halls Hill, up 20th Street into the back of Glebe through my yard, which we let people cut through from over in the Glebewood townhouses to come through and go down Brandywine. And all of those kids have to contend with driving. And the more traffic you bring, the worse it is.
Thank you, Meyer, to all our public speakers. I do want to thank the folks who came out tonight to share your concerns, and for the folks that are participating online. I know that there are some folks here who expressed that some of their concerns weren't addressed in this process. And I want to reiterate what I said at the beginning of this meeting. A number of the concerns you're raising are concerns that are addressed through the site plan process. So things like traffic, things like parking loading, where those trucks go, tree canopy, stormwater management, site, you were also talking about people's access to the nearby school. I think that was common over here. So undergrounding of utilities. So just one moment. Yeah, I'll come to you in a minute.
I didn't take my phone.
Yes, quickly. Yes, you may.
Okay. At what point, what would be enough of a concern to say we're not gonna go through? At what point? Like, we're talking stormwater, we're talking kids walking to school, we're talking, where is the end?
So
where's your gauge? It's curious.
So what I'll say is that a number of the concerns that folks are raising, including the ones that you just listed, are ones that every site plan addresses or has to address. And so things like
those
site
aren't
circular-
concerns enough to
Well,
stop the flop study altogether and just the kibosh on the whole project.
Well, I guess
You're not.
there's two things to say. One is we don't, we're at a really high level with this study. We are trying to look at things that are very high level. And so we are trying to see if, the density is like I'm not saying they don't matter. I'm saying that we don't have we're not looking at it with the granularity at this stage to answer that question fully. What I think you and others in this room would want is a fulsome discussion of things like what is adequate stormwater management. We haven't done the analysis at this stage. That's like the next stage down.
So hearing from the people that live there that deal with it every day isn't enough for you, is what you're saying.
That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying the process that we're at right now is not designed to answer that question. I'm saying that would be answered at the next stage. And we could be at that stage, the answer there could be that we don't recommend that the process go forward. Or what I should hopefully you should all understand is that if we recommend that this process go forward, it is not saying that we as a planning commission or we as an LRPC endorse the Sunrise proposal. That is not what we're saying.
It just seems like that. It really does
I understand.
seem like it. Because it seems like no matter what we bring up, there is to no avail. Nothing that's important enough to just, nobody is saying, raise your hand. I mean, if you've ever bought a home before, just visiting it for an hour, you decide if you want to buy it, right? After you buy it, after you move in, you discover things that you're like, oh, you know, this by living there. So what we want is just to be heard because we're living this every day, you know? So that's all.
Understood. And I guess to reiterate is that this isn't.
Yes, you calling them?
This is the sort of beginning of this process in a way. And there's a lot more analysis to come. There's a lot more, you know, if it is to move on, there's a lot more.
I bought in a residential neighborhood.
Understood.
Not a
Well,
commercial.
understood. And so, you know, I hear you, and your concerns have certainly been heard. But yes, is this right?
Thank you.
Commissioner Ray.
Hello?
Yes, Commissioner Ray.
Yes, thank you. I'm not entirely sure where this is going and whether there's going to be another meeting. So there's a process question in this for me, but I do want to say that one, I'm concerned because if there's a redevelopment going on here, where will the current residents go? And I hope not to a nursing home or something because that's why they're in assisted living, to be able to live independently with services, of course. But so the other thing is I'd like to know what level of accessibility is going to be used here because technically any facility that's assisted living comes under the Americans with Disabilities Act, which is not necessarily true if it's a facility that's used only as multifamily residential. And also, so I'm wondering if UFAS will be used. And then the last thing is, I'm wondering if the applicant is going to contribute to improving the accessibility of pedestrian infrastructure. That was kind of mentioned by somebody else, and I think it is very important in that neighborhood to improve, if there's going to be a community benefit, improving pedestrian infrastructure will be important.
So we'll turn to Mr. McGraw, Commissioner Ray, and again, at this level, you may not be able to answer all of your questions, given that some of the building hasn't been designed. But
that's right. But to answer the questions from
but those concerns make me, you know, I don't know whether we're voting here on this or whether we're just expressing our comments about it at this point.
I can answer that quickly, and I'll go to Mr. McGraw. So LRPC doesn't take votes. It's sort of the sense of the LRPC. And to kind of answer your other question, this is, I think, at this stage, our last LRPC meeting. if the applicant does file a 4 well, in the future, if we get to a stage where the county board does adopt a study document and the applicant is able to file 4.1, there would be future site plan meetings at that stage. And that's the process that Ms. Rhodes walked through. Mr. McGraw.
Right, regarding outside of our physical site, that would be obviously up to Arlington County staff and yes, obviously we work with them on that. In terms of our own site, the property that we control, of course, we build our properties to the highest required ADA standards. I'm sure you can imagine many of our residents are in wheelchairs, so it's incredibly important to us. And to your first question about the existing residents, they are in assisted living now. Sunrise operates a number of other assisted living communities in Northern Virginia. We would work with each family to temporarily move them to another community, and then once the new building was built, we'd welcome them back to use.
And Mr. Weber, you still have a hand raised, Mr. Weber?
Yes. Thank you. I'd like to propose that the guiding principles of stormwater management explicitly include consideration for preservation of tree canopy and pervious surface, and related to that, the undergrounding of the overhead wires.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Weber. Without objection around the table, we can incorporate those changes. Okay. You're gonna have the last word here.
Oh, really? Okay.
We're over
Just one
time.
quick question. Do you have a timeline? Like if everything goes as the way you want it to, we accept it, what is your earliest you break ground?
Well, so I'm not breaking ground. So,
I mean, 2 years, 4 years, 1 year?
I honestly don't have an answer for you. This process has taken significantly longer than we originally anticipated. So,
yeah, so I mean, the review process, it would come to planning commission, with the study document in a few months, and then we go to the county board to advertise the GLUP amendment. And then they would have to file what's called 4.1 site plan. We have to go through the site plan process, which is, let's call it 6 months, once it starts. And then they would have to break ground. So you're probably talking, and permits, everything like that. So you're probably talking a year, or at the earliest before they could even consider that, maybe longer.
I would add a year. I'd add at least another year to that.
2 years. So,
And that's if everything was full blast.
That's a,
so, okay. Well, again, I want to thank folks for coming out and sharing those concerns. I would encourage you to follow this process. There is a place to sign up online to kind of follow this process along if you haven't done that already. But again, I do want to thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, no issues. Okay.
Good to see you.